Hey everybody, it's Jerry at the Fledge. Welcome to another episode of Every Damn Day. Today I'm going to start the show a little bit different than I have in the past. And I want to say something. I know that the Fledge gets a lot of attention in social media or in other medias, or leaders, talk to us and things like that. And I know that, when we take a photo of all of the food, or we take a photo of the clothing racks or whatever, those are easy, loving, good feeling photos that get a lot of attention for us. But I want to give a shout out right now and recognize the organizations and the people who don't have those photo ops, who are doing something that requires a level of privacy, or that doesn't have that cute, feel good image with it. And there's a lot of organizations dealing with victims and violence and addiction and so many different things, racism and things that don't always show up for the photo op. And I just want to give a shout out to those organizations, and go like their pages, go find them. I post about them all the time. Go show them some love too, because they're doing the work that is fixing the damage that we have deep in the fabric of our communities. And I got to put one of these people on screen right now. Our good friend Tanesha is here with Voices of Color. How you doing today, Tanesha?
I'm well. How about you, Jerry?
I'm doing good. I forgot to turn the heat back on yesterday when I was left the Fledge, and I'm freezing up in my office, but it's good. You up in your office?
I'm actually home. So I guess you would call this my mini office, I guess.
Yeah. So you've been having a good Sunday?
Yes, my daughter graduated yesterday from Northwood University. So we spent a day with her yesterday. So cool. This is my second child that has graduated from college. So it is a blessing to see them get through college in this day and time. So,
Congratulations. You're
yeah, thank
spreading hope
you.
already. I've got a daughter who's a senior at MSU, and I hope she graduates this
Um,
year.
yeah, she'll
So,
do it. She will
yeah.
do it. Even through, like what'd you say, first COVID graduation. So today I just kind of got up and relaxed a little, worked on some minor projects, and yeah, here we
Yeah.
are.
So, would you mind telling us, those of us that don't know you, will you tell us a little bit about you and a little bit about all the projects and great things you're doing?
Okay, so I am Tanesha Ash-Shakoor, as you see on the screen here. I am originally from Hollister, North Carolina. You should have probably heard the little southern twang just now. Um, it's a very small town. I literally grew up where there was no fast food restaurants, no grocery stores, anything. And my family comes from a Native American tribe called Halawa Saponi, and so I grew up very differently. And from there, I went off to college in North Carolina. I went to a historically black college and university in Durham, North Carolina, called North Carolina Central University. Go Eagles! And yeah, so from that point, life was happening as it should. I came out of undergrad. Oh, I want to tell you, I have two siblings. I have two sisters that I grew up with, and they're doing both very well. Um, yeah, so after college, I was just like kind of figure out what I wanted to do. I don't know if you're familiar, Jay, with the teen court program.
I
They
am.
have Okay, so when I came out of undergrad, I actually was the teen court coordinator for two counties in North Carolina. So I ran that program for 2 years there before I worked in a youth development center. So I did a lot with youth prior to me even coming to Michigan. Obviously, I came to Michigan, and people are like, why would you move here from the South? And I came here for law school. So I went to Thomas and Cooley Law School. I started there in 2012, graduated in 2015, and I started Voices of Color. So obviously, you're probably wondering, how did I get to that point? And after undergrad, I went through a very abusive relationship, abused and raped several times. And so I just kept imagining, like, never thinking that I would have any desire to touch any of that. And after going through law school and just realizing what I thought I wanted to do versus really where my heart was, and that's kind of what has kept me on my path now and kept me kind of focused. You might not know I'm also a pastor, Jerry.
I did not know that.
So I was ordained back in 2014. My husband, I got married in 2013, and he was already ordained in North Carolina. And eventually, we did start a church here, and then we eventually closed the doors. So I just wear a lot of hats here.
Yeah.
You can probably tell. Um,
Well,
yeah.
real quick, let me just acknowledge what you said and say that I'm sorry that you went through that. I think that I appreciate you being open, and wherever you want to go with that, I'll go with you with that. But yeah, I just want to acknowledge it and say thank you so very much for putting that out there.
Absolutely. It took me a while, Jared, to actually probably say the word rape, because this was somebody that I loved, somebody I was in a relationship with, and I didn't understand it that way. So I've learned that the more I actually say these things and I put it out there, it is my truth, right? So it helps someone else too.
Yeah. So can you start with the mission of Voices of Color? Because I really think you have a beautiful statement that you write there. Would you mind just reading it or rattling it
Oh,
off or
yeah,
whatever?
absolutely. So, the mission of Voices of Color is to educate and prevent domestic violence for all races, ages, sexual orientations, religions, and genders, and actively work towards restoring self empowerment for victims and survivors.
So what's something you'd really like to tell us about that mission and about where you're at right now before because I don't want to just lead the conversation and uh, ask you all the questions that are racing through my head right now yet.
um, okay, so and I've changed my missions like a couple of times, just really trying to capture the population of people that I deal with. Obviously, considering the BIPOC community, the Black, Indigenous, and people of color were important to me, but I also understood what it was like to be a victim and a survivor of domestic violence and not having, whether, regardless of what color you were, regardless of what religions you practice, whatever, not having limited resources just because you fit into a category. And I wanted to be able to say, like, Voice of Color helps everybody because to me, that's a life. And I remember what it was like looking death in the face and not knowing if a resource would help me because I didn't choose to be born a certain color, ethnicity. I didn't, growing up, whatever your religion, whatever categories, right, you fit into, people need to know that when their life is on the line, that they have someone that they can call and understanding with Voices of Color that it didn't matter what color you are, it affects everybody. And so that's where my mission was developed from.
Okay. I really like the inclusion in your mission and the symbiology. I'm pronouncing that wrong. Sorry. Of the Voices of Color and being so inclusive there, especially in the face of what's happening right now, what's been happening forever. I'm sorry, and the how systemic racism trickles into every single part of the fabric of our communities, and there's bias, and I'm certain that white people get more help than BIPOC people get, and but you're not going to go there to kind of make it eveny. You're saying anybody. It doesn't matter if you're hurting.
Yeah.
Let's go. Let's get this
Yeah,
fixed.
because it's a life. And if you are a minority that comes to me, obviously it's important for me to make sure I'm finding and really getting those resources available because they are limited. However, I also understand that not every person that is in that white branch may fit either because they're not of a certain class or they grew up in a predominantly minority area, or they are dating a black man. And so, it's just so many different, um, or I'll give you an example, Jerry, just to kind of give you some insight. So a lot of times, instead of us really understanding, like if a person is black or if they're white, we just look at the color of the skin to make the determination. And
Hmm.
so there was a woman that I was telling, she was actually Native American, but because of the way she spoke, even though she looked fairly white to me, she was actually Native American. But because of the way she spoke, they were fitting her into a category as if she was a minority without knowing that she was Native American because of her language.
Hmm.
And they said that she spoke ghetto, and they did not give her resources. Instead of someone like walking her through to empower her and to actually advocate for her to get these certain things in place, they handed her a piece of paper and say, hey, here, this is what you need to do. They did not help her at all. And so that's just an example of why I think it's so important, because so many people, we just label based on the color of skin. And obviously, we know we can't identify people that way.
Yeah. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions about the overall problem? Like I want to put out some myths, and I'm going to say them
Okay.
in terms of um, uh, maybe not what I believe, but what the stigmas are. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
So one of the stigmas I think is that it's 99% of the people being victims of domestic violence are women. Is that, I mean, not a stigma, but one of the things that I think most people perceive. Is that true? Or, I mean, I know there's male too,
hmm
but what
So
is the
this
data?
this is what I would say to that, Jerry, is that yes, there is some truth to that women are more likely to be abused than males. However, we also have to take that into account that males, the male reporting is underrepresented.
Hmm.
So if we really, there are abusive women, as we know, but men are not reporting their abuse, because it's typically this is, something they can handle, or either they're a punk if they report it. All these different
Yeah.
factors I think men have to be concerned about. So it's not reporting. However, so if we look at the statistics, it's 1 in 4 for women versus like 1 in 6 for men. So it's not so much of a huge gap. It's just what we're seeing, that's being reported more.
Okay. So 1 in 4 women are in a domestically violent relationship. Is that the right phrase I should be using, or should I use a different
Yeah, so you
phrase?
can say domestic, they say well, now it's kind of crossover. So you can say domestic violence relationship, or they'll typically say intimate partner
Okay.
relationship.
Okay. And then I imagine, a lot of people don't think about the gay community where it's probably, I don't know the statistics there. Do you?
I don't know the statistics right offhand, Jerry.
Okay.
It definitely, so it's also, I would say, under representation in the LGBTQ community as well, because who do they report to? There, and you have to consider the fact that there are not shelters that cater, especially when you consider the transgender community. Shelters are, because it has become more prevalent now, shelters are trying to figure out how to be inclusive, because
Mhm.
if you were born a woman and now you're a male,
Right.
going into a female shelter creates issues, right? And vice versa. So the LGBTQ community just struggles with who can they go to, um, because they already deal with so many other stigmas on top of it, and this is just one other thing that just doesn't help.
Yeah. I did a showing of Marsha P. Johnson's kind of short documentary.
Mhm.
I think there's several of them, but I mean, that story broke my heart too, because it's so complicated. And I'm going to go into another one question if you don't mind.
Okay.
Often domestic violence comes with a lot of other issues, right? Like alcoholism, for example, or alcohol use. Um, how do you untangle all this? I mean, do you just feel like you're up against a mountain sometimes?
Um, so the biggest thing I think that when we look at domestic violence, we have to separate it from these factors that contribute to. So because there is a myth that alcohol causes domestic violence, causes one to be abusive, and that's not the case. People just choose to be abusive. However, that does not mean that alcohol doesn't enhance behaviors, right? Because
Yeah.
of where they're mentally at, but it does not cause it. And so when we're dealing with those are separate things that you really have to dissect to understand that when you're dealing with the abusive part, that's just it. If someone also has, like, I'll use for me example, my ex had a alcohol problem. So for me to have said, okay, there's therapy, there would need to be therapy for two separate issues.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a lot to dissect per se. It's just giving people to understand that this is not the reason that you do what you do.
So, when we were just talking about treatment for the abuser, right? I
Mhm.
mean, what I see, and I'm going to come back to another subject, but while we're on that for a second, I see a lot of people, in today's cancel culture, as soon as somebody is identified and outed as an abuser, the whole community may just cancel them and kick them out of the community. And then they go to another community and maybe it happens again. What is what's your position on that? How do you look at that? And how do you stay so calm and kind and when it must be somewhat triggering as well?
So what I have to remember is that, and just because my undergrad degree is in criminal justice, so I have some perspective on the system as well, and then also having my law degree. So essentially, I do believe that there should be consequences for the actions, right? But I also
Hmm.
know that, and we've seen it, just incarcerating someone does not change the mindset, and so you have to deal with that person still as in the root of what is going on, to the why are they abusive. And so, if you take, for example, and we just had a recent incident, I forgot what state it was in, where a gentleman had killed his former wife. He served time for that of some years, came back out, got remarried, and he killed this wife as well. And so, what that tells me is that is yes, there should be consequence. I'm not yes, there should be some
Hmm.
should be jail time, and prison time. However, if we're not dealing with the mind and you're planning on releasing them back into the community, then we're going to see the same behaviors if nobody has worked with the mental state. And so that's what you're seeing with pretty much in locally is that they, like, again, they go from one community to the next. There is no reporting accountability.
Hmm.
Um, besides putting someone on a PPO or putting them on house arrest or something of that nature, but eventually they come off the and the world may not know. If they go to another community, that community may not know this person's past, and then they just repeat that same cycle. So
Yeah. Do you work and does Voices of Color work on that side of the equation?
yeah, obviously, I primarily work with the victims and
Yeah.
survivors. However, I am a huge advocate for getting support. If someone was to come to me and they say, "Hey, I'm an abuser," which doesn't happen, right?
Yeah.
But if someone was to come to me and say, "Hey, I need resources," I would definitely connect with my resources to get them that help and assistance.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm going to kind of end this part of the conversation and get back to the work that you're really focused on with just one thing. If you're a man out there, as tough as it might be, and you are, and I'm saying a man to a man, I'm sorry, but if you're a woman too, I guess so. um, tell somebody, go get some help. You can stop this. This is not who you want to be. It's not who you want to be. And I'm sure of it. And somewhere in there, there's still that little kid that was innocent and playing. And yeah, go get some help and reach out to someone. Reach out to me if you want. We'll find someone. Now, back to I want to acknowledge someone in the crowd who has talked about a violent rape that they experienced as well. And I don't really feel comfortable putting their name and everything up here, though they did comment publicly. So, shout out to that person. I want to acknowledge that they said that. And let's go back to that part of the equation. And what's it? How do you help? What's it look like? What's the starting point and all of that?
So a lot of times for me is, well, one is my truth and transparency. So I'm already putting myself out there for people to understand that I am someone who has lived it and I can empathize. I cannot understand their situation because every abusive or intimate partner violence relationship is very different and unique in itself. So that's my biggest connection is my truth and transparency. Most of the time, it is someone literally just calling me up, whether it's a friend or a family or the victim themselves, reaching out to me based on something they saw or someone told them about me. From there, we have a conversation, and my conversation is very simple. It's not. I let them know from the time I started communicating with them that I do not judge them. I also know that they love this person. I also know that they're struggling and want to stay in that situation despite what is happening because that's the reality of what they're dealing with. So I always try to reflect first on that what they are feeling right now is very natural and asking them what is it that they want to do. And that's the most critical part of how I move from that point because it can literally be life or death if you move without making sound decisions and if they're not prepared and ready to do it.
So, like, for example, just that they're talking to you could create a violent situation at home when they get
Yes.
home, right?
Yes.
Or,
And
I
so,
think, oh,
oh,
go
sorry.
ahead, please.
No,
No.
no, I was literally just going to say, and oftentimes once we're connected, I will use different apps. I won't say up here just because this is going to be public, but I will use different apps to communicate that's more encrypted versus just pulling it up through text
Mm,
message. And also, you get to see with my website that if one goes to my website, I have a leave button. That leave button on my website, if say for instance if an abuser is coming in on them, they can
hmm
click the leave button and it will immediately take them to the local weather channel so that they're not seen on that particular website.
Um, you're amazing. I mean, this is so well thought out. You're using tech the way that it should be being used to solve an important problem. Um, you told me some statistics before regarding how many times a woman has to leave. And it's not as simple as zap, leave, and it's a few times, isn't it?
So it's 7 times they leave 7 times before they stay away. That's the statistics right now on average of a matter of 7 times.
That's it seems like it should be simpler than that.
Yeah, and most people really think that it is like, if I get calls from friends or family of someone they know that's, and I listen to the conversation, I'm just like, yeah, it's just not that easy because, you could leave the most dangerous period of an intimate partner relationship is the leaving. You're more likely to be killed after when you're trying to leave and after. And so again, that's why it's so important. And it's not, and Jerry, one of the things I really just want to point out is that if you don't have, most people say, hey, they can come live with me, they can come and do this. Right. But do you have everything in place that this person may have already had? Security is stability, is, so especially if they have children. Um, money, income, something that they can say that's tangible to support them when they leave. Because sometimes, despite the abuse, their abusive relationship home environment looks better than what they're going to. And that's another reason why they don't like to go to shelters.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, the you're the first guest that's ever made me lean in to listen to you more. When you're leaning into me like that, it's so I don't know. It's so if you don't mind, I do work in the harm reduction space and the addiction space, and my daughter died of a fentanyl overdose. And every time I give out a safe needle or I give out a dose of Narcan or naloxone, or I see somebody, just tripping out in the front yard out here, it triggers me. What? How does that happen to you every time? Can
Uh,
I lay down on my couch and you get
yeah,
me through this?
we'll both be laying there, Jared, because I still struggle. Just as of last year, I was still going to therapy. So there are often times that I will pick back up with therapy. I'm not exempt. I still have triggers, and I don't know what those triggers are right until I'm actually triggered.
Yeah,
So I do not exempt myself from ever thinking that I am completely healed or that I still don't have um, flashbacks. Like I still have dreams. And I've been chasing my dreams. I see the shadows. I have flashbacks. There are sometimes that, and I also have to, like, sometimes, I can be very overwhelmed at periods where if I'm just getting a lot of calls or one particular case is just taking me a lot of time to get through. Um, I have to pull back, and it's good to have like accountability partner. So my husband will oftentimes say, he just kind of nods his head to kind of let me know that he's seeing that I'm getting overwhelmed and that maybe I'm digesting a lot more at the moment that's affecting my demeanor.
yeah,
And so I will take a step back. Um, I do self care. Like I like to go get my nails done or something. Sometimes just checking out to go to, Costco,
yeah,
um, and really sometimes, Jared, my biggest problem that I can honestly tell you was I used my personal cell phone was my connection. So that was my work phone and my personal because I wanted people to feel like they had that much access to me when they needed help. And what ended up happening was I was so afraid to put my phone down at like 5 o'clock because I was scared that that was going to be a life. Somebody tried to reach me and I was not available. But I've had to pull back a little and understand that I can only do but so much. I'm one person and I'm not intentionally leaving someone out there to be killed. So
yeah,
it's a constant a self-assessment there. It is.
yeah. Is is there something you do every damn day that pushes your mission forward?
I would probably say really is staying in the know, staying in the know about what's happening locally and also with being a part of legislation. What I always wake up thinking about the why I do what I do. And that doing that every day for me is what keeps me going and keeps me in really like detailing my mission and why, and then trying to like I'm literally always talking about domestic violence. I don't know if there's a day that goes by that I'm not having a conversation. And so that to me, the conversation, I'm literally having a conversation every day about domestic violence and educating someone, whether it's a sentence that I give them 2 minutes of my time. That is what I do every single day. Have the conversation.
Well, I can attest to that because I don't know how many times we've ever talked, but several times. And you've taught me something every time, and I come away more educated. So that part of the mission for sure, I know is working, and I hope we're spreading the word a little bit more today too. I'm gonna go into the show where I'm daisy chaining the show together and asking the question from yesterday, and we'll have time to talk about more stuff too. Um, what Brittany, who was on with New York Life, who was signing for the whole show yesterday, wanted to ask was what's something you do to decompress, because you're in a stressful uh, work anyway, and then you put the systemic racism on top of it, and all of the police brutality and the protests and all of the stress with that, and then COVID. I mean, you got a valve that you just press and is it magic?
I, I wish that I did, and I can to answer her question. I could probably honestly say I don't do a very great job of decompressing because I it is every day pretty much for me. But I am trying to do a better job of decompressing, and that is finding. So a lot of times with my husband, I can't get into. I can't get into um, particulars with him, obviously because of the confidentiality. But there's one other person that does work alongside with me, and sometimes just debriefing about different cases and how I can better serve, and in that way, because sometimes I am putting more into it than I may need to because my heart is in it. Um, but other than that, the other part was just at a certain time. Now I went and I got me a
Mhm.
personal phone versus my work phone now,
Yeah.
and I separate myself. I turn that phone off at a certain time, and I completely walk away from it. Um, and that was hard for me to do. So that has allowed me to decompress and kind of enjoy my family. So for me, getting back to a normal life as much as possible when I've done all the domestic violence work, to go enjoy my family, watch a movie, or sleep, do nothing sometimes is what helps me just kind of get it off me.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think I need another phone, or at least another phone number.
Yeah, I had to.
So, tomorrow on the show, we have a young lady, Leela Green, who's a children's book illustrator, and they actually use play therapy in their current book for helping with depression and getting kids talking about stuff. And what question would you like to ask her?
So, I think my question would be in doing her illustrations, especially talking about this particular one, the illustrations, does she allow her like experience to help her bring that illustration to life?
Yeah. And since you've kind of talked about that as really a basis for why you got started and how you can empathize and how you can meet someone where they are, I'm
Mm.
going to change the question back to you a little bit and ask you, have you are there a lot of times when you're there and you're at a loss, you've not had that experience, or you've not thought of that? um you know I saw my I won't say a lot of details. I know of a situation where a man was abusing a woman. She had children from another relationship, and he took all of their toys out on the front yard, lighter fluid, and burned them all. That I can't even fathom that. And I imagine you see so many things I don't want to really. I actually would like to learn, because I don't close my eyes to suffering. That's how we build understanding.
Mhm.
But I'm sure you've seen that. And is there anything, I mean, how often are you just shocked?
Probably daily, Jerry.
Uh,
Because what we have learned is that as traumatic as you think your story is, when you've dealt with abuse and you've dealt with rape, and then someone comes to me and they tell me they've survived because they were shot 11 times, they were stabbed over 20 something times, They were left for dead, and especially like if they have children. Because when I went through, I didn't have children at the time, and so it was me, and it you can move differently when it's just you versus when you have children. So that's why I always say I can empathize, because we there's that cycle of emotions that we all go through with our abusers. And so even though our stories are very unique, we can share in that abuse is abuse no matter what the person did, and that there's going to be trauma effects in the end. But understanding that, I think the biggest thing is always recognizing that each one is unique. Um, but our common thing is that we were all abused, and no, typically with survivors, no one is trying to outweigh the other
Mhm.
person's story. Like, we're not sitting around like, my story was worse than yours, I bet you I can top you. That's not the case. And so even though I might not feel like my story trumps the next person, when she hears me speak, she's like, oh my God, but he didn't come in and brutally rape me every
Yeah.
night. You went through that. I didn't. And so there's bits and pieces of just, um, at the end of the day, we all share a common theme.
Thank you. Um, do you like the term entrepreneur to describe you?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
Do you think that's when I first met you and you told me your story and you told me how you were making all your dreams kind of start to come true and piecing them together? Um, I think you're amazing, and I'm going to say something that kind of sounds like I'm closing the show, but you get the last word on this show today. And entrepreneurs are out there solving problems in our community and finding ways that we can, identify the unique causes that are there. The causes are unique for every relationship, for every community, and we've got to solve them with solutions that can be sustained by our community. And that's why innovators and creatives like you, Tanesha, are so important to fixing the social ills. We can't buy these solutions off from Amazon and implement them, or, put in some $1 billion solution that we won't have funding for next year. And I love the work that you're doing, and I love you for doing it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And
And
Jerry.
and I consider you one of the finest entrepreneurs I know, because you're pushing it and you're taking risk and you're doing things all the time that are creative, innovative, using tech, things like that. So, what I would like to ask is, would you take us out with something you want us all to know, to learn, to anything?
If I could say anything, that would be to not, I think it's so important that we have grace for those who have been abused, and that we not judge them in their situations. A lot of times we have chosen to think that because one has been abused or they're in an abuse relationship, that something's wrong with them, that they're stupid, they lack the capacity to, they're less educated of some nature. I say, if I could just encourage everyone to have grace for victims and survivors, have an open heart and an open door, that whenever they come, that you will be the one that's willing to save a life. And if you don't know how to save their life, don't judge them, but get them to a resource that can help them. And guess what? If they choose to go back the next day, the next week, the next month, extend that same grace when they come back again and they're ready.
Thank you so very much for being on my show today. I've got to keep a promise here, so I'm going to struggle through this. I want to start signing "See you later" to everybody, so I practiced a little bit. I think I'm getting it right. So see you, and then oops, later. You're doing great work. I'm so proud to know you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jerry, for having me today.
Thank you. See ya.